I remember a specific fight with my dad because he was so afraid of me taking this pathway that would potentially end me up in a mental asylum or homeless. I just knew if I could get this on the shelves of Barnes and Noble somehow, this would help so many people. And they just thought I was crazy. And at that point, I was just certain that I'm not going to take the path that they want. Did they tell me to follow my dreams and believe in myself? And here I am doing it, and I'm a failure, I'm a loser, I'm the scum of the earth. And it made me realize how much I had been living for their stamp of approval. And this wave came over me, this feeling of numbness. That was the level of rock bottom that I needed to reclaim my power. I was 23 years old at this time, and I would just spend all my time just writing and writing and writing. And honestly, I just knew if I could get this on the shelves of Barnes and Noble somehow, this would help so many people. If only I knew this stuff, I wouldn't be in this situation now. And slowly I started to get a better digestive system. And finally I started menstruating again. So I'm like, okay, this stuff works. So honestly, I thought in my head, if I just write the whole book, then I didn't know what the next step would be, but then I knew I could get it into the shelves of Barnes and Nobles. And then that took me down a 2-year plus journey of, I had no direction. I had no table of contents. I never met an author in my life. So I would just write this book and then have like a different idea about how to write it and rewrite this book. And at this time too, I left for Bali. I left India because living in India is quite challenging, especially as a single woman. And there were times that I was definitely in danger there. And I just knew that I didn't have the freedom that I wanted to have living in India. So I left for Bali, and being exposed to people in Bali who were all these like spiritual entrepreneurs and doing these, they were like tantric life coaches. I'm like, do your parents know you're here? Like, is this allowed? And that really exposed me to new ways of doing things.
You said something told you to go to Bali. So what was that told you to go to Bali that you can you're aware of now? What do you think that something was?
Honestly, I think I just watched Eat, Pray, Love a few years before. And I'm like,
so it planted
Bali's
a seed.
popping off. I never met anyone that went to Bali in my life. It wasn't like Instagram hadn't even really started yet at this point. So it was just like, I just knew Bali was a place of spirituality. And if I just got there, I'd figure something out. And also I knew it was pretty cheap, so I could afford living there.
It sounds like you didn't have a job. You're like bartering, you're staying with host families.
Most of my income came from the health coaching that I would do. And living in India, my hut was $2 a night. So if I was like, if I could make like $300 this month, like I'm good.
Got it. So you saved up some money, you got a ticket to Bali, one-way ticket, of course.
Yep.
And you ended up with another host family near a farm to table community. So talk a little bit about that experience and how it impacted you in your past.
Yeah. So I went on Airbnb and I found this place, and it was called Om Unity, like OM. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. I can only afford 2 nights here, but I'm here. So I went, and then I just stayed with that family, and I would help them around, like help them in the village, help them cook, help their marriage and their relationship. There what needed to be done. And I loved it there because it was like a true Balinese village in the rice fields, no tourists. And being in India, it's super crowded and convoluted and just like so much going on. So here in Bali, I could really have time to think and heal. And then I went to Ubud, and that's when I really started to find this community of just people on a healing journey. And originally because I had studied Ashtanga yoga in India, like very deep on a yogic path. But that's when I discovered ecstatic dance and shamanism and a new way of doing things, which just unlocked an entirely new pathway for me.
That sounds.
Hey, really quickly, if you like this content or if you don't like it, let me know down in the comments, because your likes and comments are going to help me learn what you want more of. And then that way I can keep bringing you the good stuff. All right. Thanks so much for your feedback. And back to the show.
Beautiful. And meanwhile, in the background, your parents are threatening to disown you. So how are you balancing those two?
I'm like ecstatic dancing. I get a text from my mom, and it's like a novel of like, you ruined my life. And like, and it would just take me off. That so much of like being in Bali was just trying to figure out, am I selfish for being here? Am I selfish for choosing my own path? Maybe I should just sacrifice this one thing for my parents. Look at all they sacrificed for me. That one thing being my dharma, my purpose, my life. But I'm causing and at this point, my aunts are calling me, my brother, everyone is begging me to come home, saying I've basically destroyed my entire family. And one thing about me, I have always been honest. So I would tell my mom, I went under a waterfall with a shaman. He held my head under the water for 30 years and I was seeing visions. And she's like, what the fuck? But I felt like if I keep telling her these things, it's going to open her up to it more, which in some ways it did, but in other ways it just scared her because she was afraid. Like also in India, there were times, I stayed at the Osho ashram. I tried to go to the Sadhguru ashram, but didn't end up working out. So I was like, so she would look up Sadhguru and be like, this looks like a creepy old man, and I'm afraid of what's going to happen if you go there. And by the way, my time at the Osho ashram was amazing, I will say. So they were very afraid of what can happen. And it's true, there definitely are cults out in the world and people who take advantage. And honestly, I'm so grateful that I'm safe and I'm not telling anyone to do what I did. But for some reason, I was divinely protected. And I just kept meeting people. Like specifically, I met this woman named Malaika, who's this incredible 55-year-old, just like eccentric shaman. And she had this training called 5 Elements Shamanic Dance Activation. And I went to some of her African dance workshops and different workshops, and I was just so blown away by the earth element, the Shakti, the groundedness, the reverence to nature. It was like a whole level of soul that I had never felt in yoga, where it's very disciplined and masculine. And it's about holding back. Whereas this was about the feminine path. So I knew I needed to do her training. So I did just like a work study trade for her that I would just like go around Ubud and put up her billboards and help her with whatever she needed help with so I could do this training. And that really unlocked just a certainty within me, because before that I was not sure of like, is spirituality just going to be this hobby that I have on the side and then I have to go back and get a normal job? Like, can this be me? Like, all of you guys are white. Is this just for white people? Like, I was not sure. I'd never seen someone like me doing something like this. I felt like you guys are so lucky because you have these like American Western parents that you guys can talk about sex on the internet. Like, I could never do that. And I remember like I saw this girl, she wasn't even my friend at this time, Melissa Ambrosini. She wrote this book about sex. And I'm like, maybe in the next lifetime I could do something like that, but never in this. So it was like this, I see it works for you guys, but it's never going to work for me. But doing that training, healing through ecstatic dance, releasing so much of the generational trauma and pain. And I was also dating this guy in India, and like that was also holding on to my old former self. So all of that gave me that certainty in my path.
Did you finish the book in Bali? Did you actually finish writing that book in Bali, or did you not finish it until later?
No. So that first book was called Eat Right for Your Mind, Body, Type. And, just for people listening to this, I suggest having a table of contents before writing a book because I just kept going for 2 years and never knew when it was done. And the truth is your book is never done. So then finally, after all of this, I came back to LA. I was living with my grandma at the time.
No, you were in Boston first. You got to tell the Boston story first, because that's where you disconnected from your parents.
Exactly. So basically I was in Bali and in India, and finally it was time. Like if maybe what I could have done is just stayed there, but I had so much guilt. And I think even a lot of my human rights stuff was fueled by guilt. And guilt is a huge part of, I think, many immigrant cultures, but I just felt so bad for being there that I needed to fix whatever I could with my family. So I went back to Boston, my childhood home where I grew up, and it was just a collision.
In the basement, by yourself, no friends, because you'd been traveling.
No friends. The boyfriend that I had in India, I found out was cheating on me.
Cheated on you.
So I had no one to talk to about this stuff, totally, because the people in Bali is just like, you're there. And if you're gone, it's like, bye. So right. I came back and I was processing this breakup and trying to figure out like, how do I get the fuck out of here? And I would like go outside and my parents lived in a suburb and I would just like shake and do these practices. And they just thought I was crazy. Like there were actual talks about sending me to a mental institute, not even joking. And they were worried that something happened to my brain. And that's why I'm like this. And I would just keep, and at that point, I was just like certain that I'm not going to get the job and take the path that they want. But I, again, didn't have I was just like, I'm going to get this Ayurveda book off the ground. It's going to happen. And they're like, you've been saying this for 2 years and it hasn't happened yet. So I remember a specific fight with my dad, and my dad, now I realize, definitely has Asperger's. And I didn't know this until recently. So he's like, when people have Asperger's, they're very cut off sometimes from empathy. So he says things that are super blunt and can be taken really mean. So I was telling him this, and he's just started, and he also has really bad anger problems and is a narcissist and has OCD. And so all of the whole mixed bag, and can be a loving person. But because he was so afraid of me taking this pathway that would potentially end me up in a mental asylum or homeless, he just said whatever he could. So he would say, you're a complete loser. You're a failure. You're the scum of the earth. You are not my daughter, and I want nothing to do with you. And saying all this, not like I'm saying it, in yelling and shouting and yelling at my mom of, why did you raise such a disgusting daughter? Who does she think she is? She's not a reflection of our family. This is what we did this all for. It's your fault. You sent her traveling in the world. You're the one who exposed her to these hippies who gave her this idea. What a waste. So I remember going down to my childhood room where I saw like my dolls and everything. And I just looked up at them and I'm like, was this bullshit? Did they tell me to follow my dreams and believe in myself? And here I am doing it, and I'm dead to them. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. I'm the scum of the earth. So what the fuck did I do this all for? And it made me realize how much I had been living for their stamp of approval. Like even me trying to explain myself to them is like, will you approve of me now? If I just tell you enough times, like, will I be enough for you? And here I was, dead. And this wave came over me, this feeling of numbness, of just, well, if I have no one to live for but myself, then I'm just going to live for me. I'm not going to make every decision around, okay, well, what would they think about this? Or how could I get them to understand? Or what's the happy medium between what I want and what they want? Instead, I'm just going to decide for myself and pretend I don't exist to them, because basically that's where it's gotten. And that was the level of rock bottom that I needed to reclaim my power. And I had met this girl in Bali on the shamanic training I had done, and she was going to lead a retreat in India. And she had told me about it earlier. She's like, why don't you co-lead it with me? You could teach Ayurveda stuff. And I was like, my parents would never let me go back to India. This time I messaged her. I'm like, I'm coming in India. And I let my parents know, not ask, let them know I'm going back to India. And that's what I did.
And I started calling you escapist and other names, but you were just completely tuned out at this point.
An ongoing, you're an escapist. Like, what are you looking for? Like, what are you searching for? This truth you're searching for doesn't exist. The truth is, everyone doesn't like their job. The truth is, no one's really happy. You just have to make peace with it. You think you're going to live in this la la land, that you're traveling and doing what you love, and it doesn't exist. Get real.
Wow.
And part of me was like, well, I guess that's true because that's what I've seen the experience of everyone else. But then part of me had seen glimpses of this other reality. Not that everyone living in Bali was happy. I saw a lot of the shadows in that community as well. But they were living like these other pathways that no guidance counselor could have told you to become a tantric life breathwork coach, you know? So I knew it existed. A lot of them did struggle with money though. So I made the choice of I would rather do what I love and not make enough money to live in the US, but make enough to live a comfortable life in Bali and in India than get a job. Like, cause the jobs I was applying for were like work in makeup at L'Oreal and like become a real estate agent, like things that if I had to do this day in and day out, no amount of money could even numb me for the level of pain I would have been existing in. So I still at that point thought you either do what you love or you make money. It's a choice. And I just chose doing what I love.
And you were becoming increasingly disenchanted with the United States until you moved to Los Angeles, right? And found your sort of community of people there. Talk about the how you ended up getting that book deal.
Yes. So after being in India, I went back to India, hosted the retreat, stayed there for a few months. And there was actually a situation that I was in that this man who in Goa, there's no like taxis, it's all motorcycles. And this guy would take every single day on the motorcycle, like every day. I knew this guy, trusted him. It was one of my last days that I was like planning to leave and come back. And I had a performance, belly dance performance. So I was wearing makeup. I was still completely covered up, but his interaction with me was a little bit different that day. And to get to this belly dance performance, we had to drive about like 20 minutes through the jungle where there's no cell phone reception or anything. So I'm driving through the jungle and he puts his hand on my inner thigh. This man is like 20 years older than me, a lot bigger than me. I remove his hand off my thigh. He puts his hand on my thigh again. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, how old do you think I am? I'm like, 50. He's like, oh, I'm 32. I'm like, what is he trying to go for? And he's like, and I had lied and I told them all I had a husband in Delhi just so they all thought I was married. And he's like, you don't have a husband, do you? And I'm like, I do. He lives in India. No, he lives in Delhi. And then he kept putting his hand on my thigh again. And I was just like, holy fucking shit. He's probably going to stop the motorcycle and try to rape me. And I have no cell phone reception. I can't believe I fucking trusted this guy and have been going on his motorcycle every single day. And here I fucking am.
If you like that video, you're going to love the next one. Click this thumbnail right here and I'll see you over there.